Hello. Okay, I think it's working now. I realize I actually have to click the button to start the stream. I'm just going to check my voice. Yeah. Oh yeah, this is so much better. Okay, let me take that out. Cool. Yeah, so we're back in the live stream. Again, I don't prepare that much. I try to wing it. But I have thought about this a little bit. So what we're going to talk about is what the hell went wrong with the typing yesterday. And then we're going to set up an actual Overmind application, connect to the dev tools, which I hope works as it should, because there's some security issues with domains and stuff when you have like a local app and then like Code Sandbox, which is on the web, tries to connect to a local app and stuff, but it should work. And then I thought maybe we could try to connect to Firebase if we have time for that. Yes. So what happened yesterday? We got into some typing issues with Overmind, and the reason was actually like Code Sandbox has a service that handles typing. So whenever we load up a dependency, we go to a service that we have built to go and collect the typing. And this service was completely clogged up. There was something wrong there. And it took actually half an hour for me to get my types. So we did a session, went through the code, went through the service. So we actually improved that service a lot. So it just generally should be faster and more predictable, though we're monitoring that. So that was nice. Like 2 minutes into doing the streaming, and we all have already improved Code Sandbox. So that's awesome. Another thing I commented on was when I wrote my description, I wanted to have a link there, but I wasn't able to because it was like raw text. But now, boop, there we go. Now we have Markdown in the description of sandboxes. And this is actually related to a feature that's coming a little bit later. But I actually found other issues as well with the existing Markdown implementation. So for example, we weren't able to reflect line breaks correctly. So when you were editing and you were doing line breaks and stuff, and then you kind of save that, suddenly things would change because it didn't handle the line breaks. So again, 2 minutes into streaming Code Sandbox, and we have already improved like a UI feature. So this is looking good. This is bearing fruits already. So super excited about that. But yes, yes. I guess that's it. There wasn't anything else. Yeah, so I got a question about this piece of code. And again, if you weren't with us on the previous stream, I set up a simple application here. I'm using React, and we're going to use Overmind and also stitches. This is just for my own enjoyment. And then I've split it up into like components, Overmind, and UI components. And this is just how I organize stuff. I don't think it's the best way to do it, really. It's just habit. Many developers likes to split up by feature, which I have yet to try out. But I really like this concept of building my application in terms of state and logic. And then the components are only responsible for basically transforming my app into the UI and then dispatch events back to the app. So having that separation, that's something that feels very natural to me. And that is why I'm like building Overmind and creating these dev tools. It's to explore this space of thinking about your app without a UI, basically. Anyways, I'm starting to ramble about that. So the question was related to this piece of code. Because in Overmind, you have two types of typing. You have implicit typing, which I'm doing here, and you have explicit typing. Now, implicit typing is there because, well, basically it's just less code. And what this piece of code does is to tell the Overmind package that everything you import from Overmind should use, this is where the magic happens, type of config. So whatever type you import from the Overmind package itself, it being actions or whatever, will know about your configuration. And this is kind of the thing we went for with Overmind, is that you shouldn't write all these types and combine them together and do all this stuff. We really wanted you to just set up your application, which results in like a main configuration. And then you could just say, this is my configuration, and then everything just works. So yes, with the explicit typing, you would just manually create all the different types that you use when you create actions and stuff. And like the difference is that doing this feels uncomfortable for some hardcore TypeScripters, which I can understand. Also, if you have like maybe more complex typing, you have separated out a lot of stuff, you want more control of the typing, you do explicit typing. Okay, but let's get going here. I really want to see if the DevTools runs. Okay, so I have my index file. I have like empty state here, and I'm supposed to export my config. And the reason I export my config is that because I want to separate my configuration from the instantiation of Overmind, because then I'm allowed to use that configuration for other purposes, like, for example, testing. I don't want, when I write my test, that it instantiates Overmind in the context of actually running the app. I want to control the instantiation. So we can go to main file here. Let's import the config from Overmind. And we're also going to import create Overmind from Overmind. Yes. And what I'm also going to do, I'm going to go to my preferences, and on the preview, I don't want preview on edit. I want to save my code first. It's just so it doesn't flash all the time. Like, it's really cool to have this instant update. But there are like more certain scenarios, I feel, where it works better. For example, when you change styling, there it's awesome. But when you're like creating new stuff, you get a lot of errors, and it can be a little bit distracting. Yeah, give some feedback on that if you have some experience with it. Like, how should that maybe be like a mode that you can toggle more like faster? So if you go into styling mode, then you kind of do that thing, like where it instantly updates. But if you're not in styling mode, then it updates on save. Anyways, let's get going. Cool. So we are going to create our Overmind instance, and we pass it config. And what we're going to do is, so when I save now, nothing should really happen in the DevTools. This is Code Sandbox, by the way. Yeah, maybe you want to look at Code Sandbox. Yes. So I'm not sure about the size here. Let's see. Yeah, maybe this is a little bit small. I'm not sure how I can make this bigger. I'll check this out for the next stream. Maybe I should run this in a different resolution. But anyways, here you can actually see all the state we have in Code Sandbox. And this is the cool thing about Overmind. You actually get insight into the whole application. You can even see where we derive state, and you can see the current value of that derived state. So for example, we have like a current sandbox, and we can look at all the state of that sandbox. We can change it around and stuff like that. And on actions there, yeah, that's why it was so slow. It's almost, it's been running in the background. So I have like over 2,000 actions there. But we can like look at, let's see. Do we have something here that we can look at? Yeah, so for example, sandbox info updated. We have all the insight we need into what state changes did we make, what side effects did we run, and we can look at the return value of all the side effects. And like this truly shows the power of how Overmind can help you build that mental image. Yes. Anyways, there's like a little code snippet inside Overmind which prevents the DevTools for starting up when you're not on localhost. And the reason is that like Firefox and Safari, and they just completely break. So you have to be explicit about setting up the DevTools. And I believe I'm running on port 3031. So if I save now, let's see. Oh, it's super slow here now because of these actions. Let's see. Oh, let's get away from here. There we have React app. Yay! So it's running. So if I were to go in here and add like some state now, string foobar, and I'll save that. And we get foobar into our dev tool. That's awesome. Woo! Cool. Okay, so now we have our dev tool. What should we do now? Maybe we should try to install our Firebase dependency and see if we can get that running. Yeah, should we do that? Yeah, I think so. Let's just try to make sure that like everything runs related to that. So first we need to figure out like Firebase npm. I believe there's like, don't they have like a namespace or a scope now? So you have like, can I use this one? Yeah, Firebase initialize app. Okay, cool. Let's try this. Add dependency Firebase. Whoop. And this is a cool thing. Like I just added it and like, oh, it's pretty weird when you have an environment that's tailored for development like Code Sandbox, and you see how like instant and fast things can be. You kind of look at your local environment and it's like, why are we putting up with this? Everything's so insanely slow, and it's really exciting now because there's a new trend with bundlers where there's been this focus on building the app first, like minifying, concatenating modules and all this stuff. But now we're turning towards the development side of things, and those two things are very different. Like building for production and running a development process are like very different. And now we're starting to see tools where you actually do get like instant response when you make changes to files, but still you have to set up all this stuff. So it's nice to just go in and work on stuff and don't have to worry about the environment. Like I feel like I'm selling Code Sandbox here. I'm a really bad salesman, which is why I do programming. But yeah, I just want to point it out. Cool. Firebase. Maybe we can connect. You know what we should do first? We should try to connect Overmind to React so that we can see that we actually get something on the screen. And then we'll create the Firebase effect. And then I think maybe we're done after that. But okay, to actually expose Overmind to React, like Overmind supports different frameworks. And the convention in React is that you provide an instance of whatever you want to provide to your React app. And that also just helps with testing and stuff. It's kind of like the decoupling I talked about with the config and the instance of Overmind. It's the same with React. You have your React app, and then you have your instances of app-specific stuff outside, and you kind of provide it. So what we need is the provider from Overmind React. Oh, I didn't. Let's add Overmind React. Didn't add that. Cool. And now let's see if it. Yay! there we have the types. Awesome. So the way we do this is that we wrap our app in provider, and then we have value, which is like the default thing for a provider. There's been some talks about this, like it should rather be like Overmind or something, but I haven't changed it. It doesn't matter. Cool. So now we're providing Overmind, meaning that when we go to our app component, we should probably move that soon. We want to use a hook to access the state. So what we do is we can decide where we want to do that, expose that hook. In the documentation, you expose that hook from your main config file. If you want to separate out your config from the React specific stuff, you can rather create like a separate thing. So maybe we can do that just to show you. So we can have like hooks, and then we have an index file for that. And then we import create hook from Overmind React. And then we have to also import a config from Overmind. And then, if I remember correctly, we do use Overmind. And actually, I want to show you the new stuff here, because with a couple of releases ago, we had some new hooks. So we can do, I believe, create state hook. So maybe we can say use app state, and then shit, I don't think I remember this. Create state hook type of config. Yeah, I think that's right. And then use actions, and then create actions hook type of config. Do we get help from it? Awesome. I think this is correct. Let's try it. So basically, instead of having like one hook that exposes state, actions, and effects, we can be explicit. So maybe some components only uses the actions, for example. And then you only have to do that. It also makes it easier to dive into specific namespaces, which I'll probably show later. Okay, so let's try to go to our, where did our app go? Let's try to import use app state from hooks. And then we have state, use app state. And this should be typed now. It looks like it's typed. It says state there. So if we go in here, hello, state dot, oh, that didn't look very much. Let's check the, oh, it's a function. I think I did something wrong. Let's see. I haven't used these hooks myself, actually. Oh, it's probably, it's, where do we have that? Hooks. Here they are. Oh, create actions hook. Oh, of course. I'm stupid. They shouldn't be inside functions. You should just create them. There we go. There we go. So we have our foo state. And the really cool thing is now it doesn't matter, like you can extend your config now as much as you want. You can add new namespaces, add state, actions, whatever, and your components will just instantly have access to this, and it's typed and ready for you. So if we save that, and we have hello bar. Awesome. We're getting somewhere. And this is going to be interesting to use these hooks, because if I were to add a namespace, I could do, maybe I had a namespace of auth, for example. I could do use app state and then do auth here. So it's like just a nicer way to be specific about what namespaces you're working on inside components, because components usually look at a single namespace. Yes. So I guess what we can try to do now is to add our effect. And we're going to clean up like files and create namespaces and so on later. We're just doing this step by step. I don't have an idea of how we're going to organize this app, so we just have to feel it out as we move on. So what we can do is create a new file called effects. And what we want to create here is, and this is the thing, like we don't want to create a Firebase effect. Firebase is an implementation detail. What we want is to create an API for our application to go and grab the data we need. The app doesn't care that it's Firebase. So we want to hide that in our API surface. So let's see, I guess we can just export something. We can call it like API, for example. That's a little bit more generic, not Firebase specific. We could call it like data or I don't know, database maybe. But let's call it, I typically go with API. And what we want to do here is to, we want to initialize Firebase. And the question is, when do we initialize Firebase? Do we just do it when we like load the app? Or do we want to be more explicit about when we initialize Firebase? So I can show you a controlled way of doing it first. And that is to, as part of your effect, you expose, for example, initialize like this. And what we do is that inside this initialize is where we actually fire up Firebase. So I have like my Firebase config here. By the way, we're going towards the dev environment. I thought that could be interesting. We develop against the dev environment, but when we're later going to try to deploy from Code Sandbox, it will point to production. So we'll see if we can get that running. Okay, so let's import from Firebase. Import from Firebase. No, what I'm doing as Firebase. From Firebase. And then we have our app, and it's Firebase. It's super nice. We got all the typing in here as well. Initialize app, and I believe that's our config. Cool. And now the thing is, we are going to add more methods here. But how do they get access to the app? They can't really access it now. So what we want to do is to, like, I could set like app up here, and then we would do this. But what happens now is that if we were to add other effects here, we would kind of like have these variables at the top, which kind of shares the scope with the other effects. It just doesn't feel quite right. So what we can do instead is to create what's it called? An IFI. And an IFI is just a function that is immediately invoked. And you should see this better now. I guess it complains because it's not being used. Yeah, so what we did now is that we created a function that is immediately called. And then basically what we return from that function is what we want to be on the API. But what we have achieved now is the possibility to include variables with the object we return here. The only thing that has access to this app now is what we return from here, or what's inside the scope of this function. This is a super nice pattern for isolating variables instead of them like leaking all over the place. And the effects is like a really good use case for that. Cool. So now we have Firebase. What's left now is that we actually have to initialize Firebase. And what we can do now is that we can what we want to do is that we want to initialize Firebase when Overmind fires up. So we could choose when to do this, but we want to do it exactly when Overmind fires up, which is before React actually does any kind of rendering. As mentioned, we could do it even sooner. We could like do the initializing up here. So as soon as this file was evaluated, it started firing up Firebase. Maybe that's a good thing. I don't know, but we're doing this strategy for now. Cool. So to do that, Overmind has this thing called onInitialize. And it's basically just a single, it's like an action, but the action runs when Overmind instantiates. And it has its own type. And as you can see, on initialize, we grab this directly from Overmind because we have implicit typing. And when we look at our, we haven't added Firebase yet, but let's look at our state first. So our state is already, as you can see, we already have our typing there because we told the Overmind package about our config. So what's missing now is that we just have to import our effects and add them to the config like this. And now when we look at effects, we should have API there and initialize. So let's call that. And then of course we have to also import our onInitialize from onInitialize, and we add that to our config. And now when we fire up, we should see some information. We have one action that's fired up, which is onInitialize, and it calls the API initialize. And I guess what we could do here as well, just to finish it. Oh, I think I need to start closing down some stuff. Let's see. Yeah, and then we can like return the app or something. Let's see what happens. We don't really need it, I think, but it's just to show you. Yeah, so you can see like we're getting a Firebase app implement something. Okay, cool. I don't want to start anything new now. Basically what we have done now is to connect Overmind to React. We have we're connected to the DevTools. We have added a little bit of state, which we render into the UI. And we have added our Firebase effect. So I guess next time we can try to just start at the beginning. If we look at our little drawing here, what we want to start with is like a Google sign-in thing. And doing that, I thought I would show you, talk about the different types of state, which might sound a little bit weird that there's different types of state, but in Overmind, you don't only have like the basic values of strings and booleans and stuff. You can also add classes, and we also have something called state machines. And an authentication flow is like a perfect use case for a state machine. So I thought we could play around with that. And then get that sign-in to work. Maybe that should be the goal for tomorrow. Get the sign-in to work. We should, yeah, should be pretty straightforward, I hope. Cool. It went a bit better this time, I think. I hope you feel that way too. And please give me some feedback if I should prepare this a little bit more, if I start to ramble a lot, or you want to see some specific things. And maybe just like last time, somebody asked me a question and then I opened this session with answering that question. So I can do that next time as well. Yeah, but that's it. I hope you enjoyed it and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.